Welcome to our Thursday's broadcast of the Gospel Truth. Today I'm just about at the end of my teaching on how to stay full of God. I've been teaching on this for 4 weeks. Tomorrow will be my last day. So once again, I would like to encourage you to please go to the effort to order these materials. You know, it's not about us making money. I'm not promoting this for money. You can go to our website and you can download all of this free. I'm just wanting to get the teaching out. This teaching has changed my life. These are things that I live by. The things that I'm teaching are just real foundational things. And of course, if you get the book, you'd have to order that. But you could go to our website and you could download the CDs and you could watch a conference where I've taught on these kind of things. It's not about the money. We're just wanting to get the word out to people, and I promise you this is something that would change your life. Tomorrow's going to be my last day, so please go to the effort of getting these materials. They would be a blessing to you. Let me go back to Ephesians chapter 4. Yesterday I was using Ephesians chapter 4, verse 17, and here it says, "This I say therefore, and testify in the Lord, that ye henceforth walk not as other Gentiles walk, in the vanity of their mind." And yesterday I shared that this word vanity, the Greek word that this was translated from, it means the inutility and transientness of your mind. Yesterday I talked about what transient meant, that it's not focused. You are just jumping from thing to thing. We're so occupied with other things, as it says in Mark chapter 4, that the cares of this world, the deceitfulness of riches, and the lust of other things chokes the word. And that's what this is describing. A person who's not focused. If you are going to really succeed, you've got to be focused. You've got to find what God's called you to do, and you've got to focus on it. The way to kill a man's vision is to give him two. So we talked about those things yesterday. What I want to talk about is the second definition of this word vanity. It means the inutility. Inutility just means that you aren't utilizing, you aren't using your brain. And boy, this is so descriptive of a large portion of things that we do today. A lot of things that we do today are just mindless. You know, again, I'm going to say some things, and I know that people will disagree with me, and I don't know, maybe I'm extreme. But I'm just saying that I see people that just constantly use these devices that you have, the iPads, your phone, and things like this, and they just play games constantly. I'm not saying that it's a sin to play a game on some digital device. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that I meet people that this is all they do. If they ever have a spare moment, they just are doing something. And you know what that is? That is the inutility of your mind. Some people might say, oh no, it's just the opposite. I'm keeping my mind busy. Keeping it busy with what? I mean, this mindless stuff where you're just doing things just to occupy time. You could be sitting there and using your mind to consider, things that you have to do. What is God's will for you? God, where am I along this deal? But instead, people just occupy themselves with things. We'll often use the word that we're mesmerized by something. And what that means is it's just like you're in a stupor, you're in a trance. It's like you aren't thinking, you're just being dominated and controlled. You're mesmerized by something. That word comes, there was actually a man, his name was Mesmer, was his last name, and he's one of the forerunners, or one of the guys who developed hypnosis. And he would bring people under a spell and hypnotize them, and it would be said that they were mesmerized. In other words, they were just under control of somebody else. They weren't controlling their mind, but they were totally being dominated by the suggestions and the commands of that other person. And in a real sense, this happens with a lot of things. People just get mesmerized by these little devices. All of the trivia stuff that we do. We sit down in front of a television set, and people, when they come home and they're tired and they're just too tired to even sit down and think, what they want to do is just sit in front of a TV set and let something else control their thinking and let their mind just wander and follow this program. And you know what? There's some instances where that's good. Sometimes a television program can take your mind and your heart and your emotions to a place that is good. For instance, you could watch my television program. You can watch a godly television program, and hopefully this is engaging you and bringing you to think and to see things that you haven't seen. And so it can be used for good, but sadly, the vast majority of all television that people watch is taking them to a bad place, taking them to places that you don't want to go. And we just get mesmerized. We fall under the spell of something. This is the opposite of what this is talking about. It says, don't be like the lost people that walk in the vanity of their mind, the transients, and their mind's not focused on the things of God, and the inutility. They aren't using their mind. They just let their mind wander. I tell you, if you don't take control and responsibility for your thoughts and control what you're thinking, I can guarantee you, you will fail. In Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, these are the first two verses that the Lord ever really spoke to me and gave me supernatural revelation on. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your body a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And verse 2 says, and be not conformed to this world. Don't be poured into the same mold. Did you know life is a fire? It will melt you. You are going to be pliable, but the good news is you get to fit into the mold that you choose. So don't be poured into the mold of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good, acceptable, and perfect will of God. And from the very beginning, one of the very first things that the Lord ever spoke to me was about how important it was for the renewing of my mind. This is how I was going to be transformed. That word transform comes from the Greek word metamorpho. It's the word we get metamorphosis from. If you want to be changed like a caterpillar spins a cocoon and then comes out a butterfly, if you want total transformation, the way you do it is through the renewing of your mind. You have to take control of your thoughts. If you are just mesmerized, letting other things control you, if you aren't using your mind and you're letting other people use your mind and control you, I can guarantee you, you will be defeated. You will fall short of what God wants. One of the keys to the Christian life is that as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. Proverbs 23:7. Bunches of scriptures talk about this. Let me turn over here to Hebrews chapter 11, and this is one of the most important things that I feel God ever spoke to me. This is profound. And it's talking about Abraham and how he and Sarah were able to believe God, and because they trusted in God and followed Him, that He became the father of many nations. And here we are 4,000 years later talking about Abraham and what a powerful man he was. And it links it to his thoughts, because it says, and truly, if they had been mindful, this is talking about Abraham and Sarah, if they had been mindful of that country from whence they came out, they might have had opportunity to have returned. Now, on the surface, that verse may not minister a lot to you, but I want you to think about this. This says, if they had been mindful of the country they came out of. They lived in Ur of the Chaldees, and God told them to leave Ur of the Chaldees and their family and all of their brethren and come out to a land that He would later give them. And Abraham was so committed to this that when it came time to get a wife for his son, he wouldn't let his son marry any of the women in that land because they were all pagans. They didn't believe in his God. And yet he wouldn't go back to his brethren to get a bride for his son because God told him to leave there. And he had totally forsaken it. He never went back. He never thought about it, is what this is saying. It says in verse 15, if they had been mindful of the country from whence they came out, they might have had opportunity to have returned. This is linking their temptation to go back against what God had told them to what they thought. It's saying if they had been mindful of the country that they left, they would have had opportunity to return. Did you know that when Abraham first came into the land of Canaan, he was 75 years old, and he died when he was 175 years old. And so for 100 years he lived in the land of Canaan, and he never did see the fulfillment of God's promise to him about inheriting that land. He never owned any of that land except a burying spot that he had for his wife Sarah that he bought, but he didn't inherit the promise. It didn't happen during his lifetime. For 100 years, God's promise of him inheriting that land did not come to pass. How did he remain faithful? How did he stay full of faith? Remember, that's this whole teaching here, how to stay full of God, how to stay full of faith, how to maintain your focus. How did he do this? For 100 years, it says he was not mindful of the country that he came out of. You know, let me just ask you, if God was to tell you, let's say to move over to some foreign land, and you went over there, and if everything didn't work out in 1 week, or 1 month, or 1 year, I can guarantee you the average person would be sitting there thinking about, well, back in the United States it was better, at least I had this, and I'm over here and nothing has happened yet, and you would think back about how good it was. See, we have people do this with our Bible college all of the time. People come out here, they're excited because in their imagination they are seeing that, man, their life's going to be changed, good things are going to happen, and they just are excited. And then they get out here and they have to start getting up at 7 in the morning to be able to make it to school by 8. They wind up having a hard time getting a job. Maybe they didn't get the right place that they wanted to live. Maybe they find out that the cost of living is higher here than it was where they came from. And you know what? They get to comparing and they go back and they think, oh man, I had such a nice place back there. You know, it was cheaper to live back there. At least I had a good job. What have I done? And then they come to me and they say, man, I'm just questioning whether I should even stay here or not. And I say, did God tell you to come out here? Well, yeah, He did. But, and then they get to looking at the problems and looking back, and I can guarantee you, if you do that, you are going to be tempted to not fulfill what God told you to do. One of the keys to the Christian life is when you have God give you direction, you don't make any plans for failure. You burn all of your bridges behind you. You jump out on a limb and you get so far out there that there's no way to make it back to the trunk. Amen. You're just out there swaying in the breeze doing what God told you to do. This is what Jamie and I have done our entire life. When God tells us to do something, we commit ourselves to it 100%. We don't hold back. We owned a house in Childress, Texas. It was the first house that we ever owned. Things were finally beginning to go fairly decent in Childress, Texas. And this is all relative. Some of you may not think this was good, but we had about 60 people in our church in Childress, Texas. That's not a huge amount, but it's the biggest thing I'd ever seen. For the first time we were eating on a regular basis. It looked like we were going to live and not die. Things were going good. And then God called me to leave those 60 members in Childress, Texas, where things were working, and move to Pritchett, Colorado, that only had 144 people in the whole town and 10 people in the church. Did you know in the natural, it looked like that was a death sentence. I had visions of going on TV and doing other things, and how do you ever get anywhere? How do you use Pritchett, Colorado as a springboard to anything else? It just looked like the death of my vision, but I knew it was God. I knew that that's what God told me to do. And so regardless of what the consequences were, regardless if my vision never came to pass, regardless if it caused me to die, regardless if it was the destruction of everything, it's what God told me to do. And once I knew that that's what God told me to do, Jamie and I sold our house. We didn't keep it in case things didn't work out in Pritchett, that we would have a place to go back to. We didn't have a plan B or a plan C. We burned all of our bridges behind us. And I mean, we committed ourselves 1,000% to doing what God told us to do. And because of that, God blessed it. God opened up doors. That's where I really began our radio ministry. I had been on radio for 2 years prior to that, but just on one little country and western station in Childress, Texas. But when I moved to Pritchett, Colorado, God opened up a door. We started on major radio stations. We incorporated the Andrew Wommack Ministries, and everything was birthed out of there. But a large part of it was because we just committed ourselves to it. And we did never think about going back to Childress. Did you know I left in Childress? Don Crow, he was my associate pastor. I had a lot of people that loved me in Childress. And when I got to Pritchett, there were some people that loved us, but also there were some people that hated us, and they came out against us. This is where I was kidnapped. It's where I was threatened to be killed. I just had terrible things. I had people lie about me. I had things happen. And you know what? It would have been possible for me to think about, oh God, it was so much better back in Childress. But because of these very scriptures, I had revelation on these scriptures. I refused to ever think backwards. All I ever did was look forward. I knew that God had called me to that. And in spite of the problems that we had and the difficulties, I just kept looking forward. There's some people watching this program right now that if you would let the Holy Spirit, He would apply this directly to you. You've stepped out in faith, believing that God told you to do something, and yet everything hasn't worked perfectly. It didn't work perfectly for Abraham. For 100 years, he never did inherit the land that God promised him he would get. It came to his children and not to him. And for 100 years, he had to keep looking forward at the promise of God and not backward about what he left. And there are some of you right now that God has led you to do something, but the problem is you're beginning to look backwards. You're beginning to think, oh man, it was better back here. And you know, if you do that, you will be tempted to quit. This verse, Hebrews 11:15, truly, if they had been mindful of that country from whence they came out, they might have had opportunity to return. To return back to Ur of the Chaldees for them was unbelief. It was sin. And so sin, or temptation to sin, was linked to what they thought. And here is a statement that God has used that just has transformed my life. It'd transform yours if you'd believe it and receive it and then apply it in your life. But you cannot be tempted with something that you haven't thought. That's a big statement. You can't be tempted with what you don't think. So, don't think on anything that would gender failure, unbelief in your life. Control your thought life. Think only on the Word of God, and all you'll get is Word of God results. Romans chapter 8, verse 6 says, to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. Spiritually minded, John chapter 6, verse 63, Jesus said, the words that I speak unto you, they are spirit and they are life. So to be spiritually minded is to be word-minded. If you control your thoughts with the Word, and if all you do is think on the Word and the promises of victory and success instead of failure, if that's all you thought on, that's all you will be tempted to experience. But if you start in some direction and because of difficulty go to thinking about, man, maybe I should quit, maybe I should fail, maybe, and you start thinking about all of these negative things, you will be tempted to go there. And so just don't do it. When Jamie and I got married, we were raised in a denomination that divorce was like the worst thing that could ever happen to you. And because of it, we have never, ever, ever, ever considered divorce. Divorce is off the table. It's not even a possibility. And Jamie and I get along great, and we love each other. God put us together supernaturally, but I'm saying that, you have problems. Everybody has problems, but we have never considered divorce. It's not a part of our vocabulary. We've thought of murder a few times, but never divorce. That was a joke. Don't write me and say something to me about that. I'm just saying that we refuse to consider these negative things. God put us together and we are committed to it, and we don't consider anything else. People that get together and have prenuptial agreements, where before they even get married, they're already deciding how they will get a divorce. I can guarantee you they haven't taken divorce off the table. It is still a possibility, and you will run into an issue sooner or later. Anytime you get two people together, they're going to butt heads. And if you are considering divorce, then you'll be tempted to do it. But man, we just took that off the table. We don't even consider it. And because of it, we've never threatened each other. We've never talked divorce. We don't do stuff like that. I'm telling you, this is not only working for marriage, this will work for anything. If you believe that God has healed you, then don't make any plans to be sick. Don't sit there and think about your funeral and plan your eulogy and what kind of songs they're going to sing at your funeral. Instead, see yourself well and think about it. And if that's all you do, if all you do is think spiritually minded, then all you will get is life and peace. If you're having something other than life and peace, it's because you were something other than spiritually minded. That's tight, but it's right. And I know that there's some people thinking, man, you're just making this too simple. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. It's that simple. It's not necessarily easy. One of the hardest things you'll ever do in your life is control your thoughts and get to where you don't let other people dominate your thoughts, and instead you take control of it. It's not easy, but it is that simple. If you control your thoughts, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. Proverbs 23:7. To be carnally minded, it's death. But to be spiritually minded is life and peace. You know, I don't have to be with you and watch what you're thinking, somehow or another get inside your head and watch what you think all the time. All I got to do is look at what your experience is. Are you experiencing death, or are you experiencing life and peace? I can tell you what you've been thinking and what you've been sowing in your life by what's coming up. I don't have to be with you when you plant a garden. All I got to do is see what's growing in your garden, and I can tell you what you planted by what's growing. Likewise, in your life and in your experience, I can tell you whether you've been spiritually minded, which produces life and peace, or whether you've been carnally minded, which produces death. You cannot be tempted with something that you don't think. Therefore, keep your mind stayed upon God, and the Lord will keep you in perfect peace.
Bedankt voor het kijken naar Gospel Truth met Andrew Wommack. Heb je vragen naar aanleiding van deze aflevering? We staan voor je klaar om ze te beantwoorden. Bel voor al je geloofsvragen met onze hulplijn. Een team van betrokken en ervaren mensen staat klaar voor goed Bijbels advies en om samen met je te bidden voor jouw situatie. Dus schroom niet om te bellen. 035 533 8875. Buiten de openingstijden kun je een voicemail inspreken en we nemen dan zo snel mogelijk contact met je op. Wacht niet langer met je geloofsvragen. Bel met de hulplijn 035 533 8875.